The following is a true story from when a Russian prince, who Gurdjieff looked up to as a mentor, encountered a spiritual master who would transform his life. I often went out of the house of my old friend, the Aga Khan, in the company of a host so rich in adventures as he. One could somehow pass one's time in the boring life of Kabul. One day I saw there among his guests, sitting in place of honor, an old Tamil in a costume not at all suitable for the house of the Aga Khan. After greeting me, the Khan, seeing my perplexity, hurriedly whispered to me that this venerable old man was a great friend of his, a queer fellow to whom he was under great obligations, even for having once saved his life. The old man lived somewhere in the north, but occasionally came to Kabul either to see relatives or on some business, and whenever he was there, he came to see him, which always made the Aga Khan inexpressibly glad, as he had never in his life met a better man. He advised me to talk with him and added that, if I did, I should speak loudly, as he was hard of hearing. The conversation interrupted by my entrance was resumed. It was about horses. The old man also took part in the discussion, and it was evident that he was a connoisseur of horses and had once been a great lover of them. Then the conversation changed to politics. They talked of the neighboring countries, of Russia and England, and when they were speaking of Russia, the Aga Khan, indicating me, jokingly said, "Please do not say anything bad about Russia. You might offend our Russian guest." Although this was said in jest, it was clear to me that the Khan desired to prevent the inevitable denunciation of the Russians. There was at that time a widespread hatred there of Russians and the English. Then the general conversation died down, and we began talking among ourselves in separate groups. I talked with the old man, to whom I felt more and more drawn. He spoke with me in the local language, asked where I came from, and how long I had been in Kabul. Suddenly, he started to speak Russian, very correctly, though with a pronounced accent, explaining that he had been in Russia, even in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and had also lived a long time in Bukhara, where he had met many Russians and had thus learned to speak Russian. He added that he was very glad of an opportunity to speak this language again, as for lack of practice, he had already begun to forget it. A little later, he said, among other things, that if it were agreeable to me, and if I wished to speak in my native language and honor an old man, we could leave together and go to a chaikhana to sit for a while and talk. He explained that sitting in cafes and chaikhanas had been a weakness and habit of his from his youth, and that now, whenever he came to the city, he could not deny himself the pleasure of spending his free time that way, because, in spite of the noise and bustle, nowhere else could he think so well. And he added, doubtless that very noise and bustle is just the reason why one can think so well there. I consented to go with him with the greatest pleasure, not of course in order to speak Russian, but for some reason I myself could not explain. Though already old myself, I was beginning to feel towards this old man as a grandson feels towards his beloved grandfather. Soon all the guests began to leave. The old man and I left together, talking on the way of one thing and another. When we reached the chaikhana, we sat down on the open terrace where we were served green Bukharian tea. From the attention and deference paid to the old man, it was evident that he was known and respected there. He had been speaking of the Taziks, but after the first cup of tea, he suddenly broke off the conversation, saying, "But these are trifles we are speaking about. This is not the point." And, after looking at me steadily, he glanced aside and became silent. The way he had so unexpectedly cut short the conversation, how he had ended it, and that piercing look, all seemed strange to me, and I said to myself, "Poor fellow, doubtless his thinking faculty has already begun to weaken with age, and his mind has begun to wander." And I became painfully sorry for this dear old man. The feeling of pity began little by little to pass myself. I reflected that my mind also would soon begin to wander, and that the day was not far off when I too would not be able to direct my thoughts, and so on. I was so lost in these heavy but fleeting thoughts that I even forgot the old man. Suddenly, I heard his voice. The words he spoke instantly dispelled my gloomy thoughts and shook me out of my state. My pity changed to such an astonishment as I had never experienced in my life. Gogo, 45 years you have worked, suffered and labored incessantly, and not once did you decide for yourself or know how to work so that, if only for a few months, the desire of your mind should become the desire of your heart. If you had been able to attain this, you would not now in your old age be in such solitude as you are." The name Gogo, which he had used, made me start with amazement. How could this Hindu, who saw me for the first time somewhere in Central Asia, know the nickname by which I was called in my childhood 60 years before, and then only by my mother and nurse, and which no one had ever repeated since then? Can you imagine my astonishment? I instantly recalled the old man who had come to see me once in Moscow after the death of my wife when I was still a young man. I wondered, could this be the same mysterious man? But no. Firstly, the other was tall and did not resemble this one. And secondly, the other had surely died long before, as more than 40 years had passed since that time, and he had been quite old. I could not find any explanation of this old man's obvious knowledge, not only of me, but also of my inner state, known to myself alone. While various similar thoughts flowed within me, the old man sat deeply absorbed in thought, and he gave a start when I finally mustered the strength to exclaim, "But who are you who know me so well?" "Is it not all the same to you? Just now, who am I, and what am I?" he replied. "Is there really still alive in you that curiosity, which is one of the chief reasons why the labors of your whole life have been without result? And is it really still so strong in you that even at this moment you are ready to give yourself up with your whole being to the analysis of my knowledge of your personality, only in order to explain to yourself who I am and how I know you?" The old man's reproach hit me in my weakest spot. "Yes, Father, you are right," I said. "Is it not indeed all the same to me, what is done and how it is done outside of me? Have I not witnessed many genuine miracles before this, and what understanding have I gained from them all? I only know that now I am empty within, and I well know that I need not have been so empty if it had not been, as you say, for my inner enemy. And if, instead of wasting my time in being curious about what went on outside of me, I had struggled with this enemy. Yes, now it is already too late. I ought to be indifferent to everything that goes on outside me, and therefore I do not wish to know what I just asked you, nor do I wish to trouble you any further. I sincerely ask your pardon for the distress you have experienced on my account during these last few minutes." After this, we sat for a long time, each occupied with his own thoughts. At last, he broke the silence by saying, "No, perhaps it is not yet too late. If you feel with all your being that you are really empty, then I advise you to try once more. If you quite clearly feel and recognize without any doubt that everything for which you have striven until now has been a mirage, and if you agree to one condition, I will try to help you. And this condition is that you consciously die to the life you have led until now. That is to say, break away at once from all the automatically established practices of your external life and go where I shall indicate." Are you tired of hearing the word subscribe? Of course you are. What about the word comment? Tired of that one too? How about like and share? Don't like those either, huh? All right, well then this is kind of awkward.